Blake, take us on your manhood journey because, you know, I'm thinking right now about the day you and I met. We met when you were a college student, and I know the story from my perspective. I was working with a mentoring group, a faith based mentoring group called STUMO at the University of Arkansas, and I see this guy sitting over there in the cafeteria by the window. And I went and sat down, and man, take it from there. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, remember the day that we met, like yesterday. Now I feel like I'm talking about the day I met my wife or something, but I remember the day you and I met.
Nope.
Gonna say we could overlay some romantic music on this or something.
Like, it was my sophomore year, and we met in the cafeteria at Bruff, and I had just 3 months earlier had maybe the most tragic moment, definitely the most tragic moment of my life that I hope none of your listeners ever experience. I had It was May of 2003. I just finished my freshman year at the University of Arkansas. And backing up a little bit, I came into college wanting to follow Christ. I didn't exactly know what that looked like, and I would say for most parts of my life that I was like ready to follow Christ. But looking back, I realized that I was still hanging on to some things that I wasn't fully wanting to give over. I was the guy freshman year who uh, didn't drink, but I was also the guy who was trying to meet as many girls as I could, and was in my dorm room secretly looking at porn, but also going to Bible study the next night. And so I was really trying to figure out my identity. Definitely on the outside, it looked like I had everything together, but on the inside, man, I had a long ways to go in my relationship with Christ and my journey of manhood and building my character. And so then May of 2003, I come home from college, and my mom had planned this kind of once in a lifetime vacation for my family. And she had always taken us, we had always planned trips to go to Hawaii or to the beach and snow skiing, but this was to Hawaii. And so it was my mom, my dad, my sister, and a brother. And the first day that we were there, we woke up and we were trying to decide, like, what are we going to go do today? Like, we're in Hawaii. And I remember we were looking at all these brochures, and we saw this brochure for taking a moped trip around the island. And my dad made this joke where he's like, could you imagine me on the moped? And my dad wasn't necessarily the funny guy, but this was funny to all of us because my dad was like 6'3", 230 pounds. He was like this huge man. Sean, he played college football at Louisiana Tech. He was Terry Bradshaw's tight end, caught his first touchdown pass. My dad got drafted by the Falcons, ended up getting hurt, so he never got to play. But that was part of my identity growing up. You know, my father was this great athlete and this really big man. And so here he was in Hawaii, like making fun of himself riding this moped. And he's like, and so we said, no, okay, we're going to pass on the moped and decided to go to the beach. And we went to Hanama Bay, which if anyone has been to Hawaii, they know that this is one of the most beautiful beaches in the world.
Hmm.
And as soon as we got there, we went out into the water and we just started snorkeling. And we saw some beautiful fish. We saw a sea turtle. Like, it was just amazing. And for me, I still vividly remember how special I felt in that moment, just being with my dad. Like, I remember sitting there saying, man, this is so cool. I've been at college for a year, and now it's just me and my dad hanging out.
Yeah.
And so we just kept snorkeling, kept going further and further out. And I remember there was a point where I put my head out of the water, and all of a sudden I noticed that the waves are a lot bigger. And now I know that we are in an area of the bay called Witch's Brew, and it's known for its treacherous waters. And so I put my head out of the water. I'm like, man, where'd my dad go? And in between the waves, like a wave would come and I'd kind of rise up to the top, and I saw my dad, and he was trying to get out of the water. And there was a point where kind of where we were at, there wasn't an easy way out of the water, and he was trying to get out of the water on this rock, and the waves were just crashing against this rock. And I remember thinking, why is he trying to get out of the water right there? And as he was about halfway out on this rock, this wave crashed against my dad and knocked him back down in the water. And I remember thinking, this is not good. And so I just started swimming towards my dad. And as I was swimming towards my dad, I remember my dad yelling for help. And I could just tell by the tone in his voice that he was really in trouble.
How far out were you, Blake, from any kind of help, lifeguards or anything like that?
Well, if you can imagine a bay, so it was like shaped like a U.
Yeah.
And so we were really far out from the bottom of the U, which is where the beach was. And so I can't even imagine like 500 yards. I mean, they were like really tiny dots on the beach.
Wow. I've seen overheads of Witch's Brew before. I can picture it perfectly.
Yeah. So I remember my dad yelling for help, and he had this booming voice, but as he was yelling for help, it was not a booming voice. It was kind of like this kind of weak voice, like help. And so I knew he was in trouble. As I got closer to my dad, I realized that he was underneath the water as I got up close to him. And at that point he was unconscious. And I mean, my mind is just like running a million miles an hour. Like, oh my gosh, what is happening? This really is serious. I've got to get my dad to shore. And so I did the only thing that I could in that moment, which was just put my arms around him and just try to swim with him to shore. And I knew this was going to be hard because, as I mentioned, there wasn't an easy place to get out of the water. So it was going to be a long swim to get to a spot where we could get out. And I just started swimming with my dad. And man, I personally was not doing well. Like, I was extremely tired at this point, and I was asking myself, like, am I going to make it? And it was by God's grace at that moment, a snorkeler in the area who I didn't even know was there showed up, and he swam to my dad and I, and he took over for me and told me to swim to shore. So I swam to shore. And by that point, the lifeguards had seen us out there struggling. And so the lifeguard went out, got my dad on the surfboard and brought him to shore where I was. And I remember,
did the guy swim out, or did he have some sort of powered surfboard? Or I'm just trying to picture this scene.
man, he was just on the surfboard, just swimming like normal. And I don't even remember, somehow they got my dad onto the surfboard and brought him to shore. And I just remember them doing CPR next to me on the beach. And I got down to a knee, and I just remember praying, God, please allow my dad to live. And about that time, my mom and sister, who were on the beach, saw all the commotion over there and all the lifeguards gathered around. And they told me later that they said, hey, that is the area that Blake and Dad were in. And they ran over. And as they got closer, I saw my mom, and I just never forget the look on her face as she came up to me. And I was like, and they're still doing CPR on my dad. And I said, Mom, it's not good. Like, I don't think that he's going to make it. And they loaded my dad up into the ambulance, and they took him to the hospital, where they pronounced my dad dead. And so, as you can imagine, this was absolutely the worst day of my life. And, it started off as one of the greatest days, being in Hawaii with my dad and family, and getting to snorkel. And then in a matter of moments, it just changed. And excuse me. And, as the next year, and I probably wept and cried and mourned
Hmm.
more than anybody. And now I'm able to tell the story without crying. Now, sometimes I do and get really emotional, but part of the reason that I'm able to tell the story now without just getting overly emotional is because of what I discovered that afternoon. So as I'm back in the hotel room,
Which, by the way, Blake, to interrupt you, this is bringing back so many memories for me because the first day I met you, almost word for word, you told me everything you just told me. It's just unbelievable. And I know the end of the story as well. And I just get goosebumps, man, hearing you say that. There is one part I never heard you say. I never heard you talk about praying on the beach, and asking God to spare your dad's life. I don't remember hearing that before. And knowing now, obviously, of course, that he didn't, that you lost your dad that day. I've seen guys go one of two directions when they experience tragedy as it relates to, belief in God or belief in following Christ or whatever. And obviously, one of those is you get cynical and bitter and you get mad at God and you go and you live your life independent from him. And then there are others who heal and press in and they get closer to God. And obviously I know which one you ultimately chose, but anyway, that just stuck out to me right there. Go ahead, bud. Tell us about.
well, to add on to that, I absolutely agree, Sean. I've seen guys like that. And I look at my life, I could have easily gotten bitter at God. I could have easily, as I was feeling so much pain, especially for the next year in my life, I could have tried to run from my pain and try to medicate it with, whatever, alcohol or girls or whatever it might be. But honestly, that next year of my life was the year that I grew more spiritually and closer to God than I had ever in my life.
Yeah.
And I have to attribute that to a lot of different things, but primarily, which is what happened next, which I was on my bed that afternoon after my dad drowned. And as you can imagine, I was just totally distraught and mourning and weeping and asking God those questions, like, how in the world did this happen, God? Why did this happen? Is there a God? I was asking those questions. And my mom comes into the room and she says, Blake, here's something that your dad was going to give you on this trip. And it's a letter. And he's been working on it for the last couple of months. And he was going to give it to you. And so I started to read this letter that I didn't know it existed. My dad wrote it not knowing he was going to die.
Okay.
And it was basically a letter of encouragement. And this letter encouraged me to persevere in my faith. This letter encouraged me to know the word of God for myself, not just rely on other people and their interpretations of it. The last line of the letter said, you're going to be a minority here on earth for your faith, but I assure you, in heaven, you'll be in the majority. Love your dear old dad in Christ Jesus. And so because of that letter, I knew that my dad was in heaven. And so as much pain as I was experiencing and how much I miss my dad, I knew that my dad was with our Heavenly Father. I knew that if given the choice, if God said, hey, Larry, my dad's name, Larry, would you want to go back to earth? He would say, heck no, I'll just stay right here and wait on them. And because of that letter, I wanted to live for the things that really mattered. I began to have an eternal perspective. I wanted to live for God. I wanted to live for the things that mattered to God.
That's really interesting because this might be, I don't want to get too morbid here, but what do you think? Do you think it would have had the same impact on you if your dad hadn't just died that afternoon? What do you think your reaction to the letter would have been if it was just him handing it to you?
I think anytime a father speaks words of encouragement to
Hmm.
their children, it's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
But obviously, just the timing of everything that this is happening literally hours after my dad died, and that God allowed for him to write that letter, allowed for me to receive it at that time. It's just one of those things I couldn't deny, like, oh my gosh, like this is from God.
Yeah.
Even if my dad wrote it, but
Well, I can tell you, Blake, I've never met Larry Brewer, of course. I've heard a lot of stories about him. I feel like I know him. I heard a lot of stories when I officiated y'all's wedding. Um, but that last line about being a minority on earth, but in the majority in heaven, I can't tell you how many times I have sat with a younger guy and told that story and that line because it's so easy to feel alone. You know, again, um, to me, you're a legend of the manhood game. And one of the things that's true about legends is that legends set themselves apart. They make different decisions. They show up earlier. They stay later, you know. And that line, I think, from your dad, that those written words have been used to encourage. I don't know how many young men, including myself, to stay the course when everybody around me is kind of like, screw that, you know, God doesn't exist, or I don't want to pay the cost that it takes to be a godly man. One of the things that has been brought to my mind over the years has been lines from that letter.
well, I mean, that happened over 18 years ago, and those words are still guiding me to this day. They absolutely are there with me, and were with me in college, especially as I was really trying to live for God and help my friends in college to know God. And there was a lot of moments that I was asking myself, man, do I really want to live for this? Do I really want to be the guy that's a little bit different because I'm willing to live for God? Do I want to be the guy that goes there in a conversation with somebody to talk about spiritual things? And it's like, no, like those lines from my dad were just pushing me like, no, you've got to talk about these things. There's nothing more important.
I remember a guy living on your dorm floor that was sleeping with his girlfriend pretty consistently. And I remember you saying to me, dude, I feel like I need to, because he was a Christian. This guy said he was a Christian. And I remember you saying to me, I feel like I need to say something to him. And I was like, yeah, you should. I remember you wrestling back and forth. Like, I don't really want to. Like, this guy doesn't want to hear what I'm about to say. He doesn't want this conversation to happen. And I remember we prayed for him. I still remember his face and his name. but I remember you had the conversation. And I remember thinking, dude, that took some balls, you know, to go and sit down with this guy and say, hey, man, I care about you. I know you say you're a follower of Christ, but you know, you're shacking up, and that's not a great model to other guys who are thinking, what is a Christian? Oh, I guess it's the same as you just do whatever everybody else does. And anyway, I still remember that.
Well, I absolutely remember that. That was probably within 6 months of my dad passing. And I had known you at that point for, 2 or 3 months. And so backing up, I met you in, I think maybe in August of my sophomore year, right after, um, 3 months after my dad died. School just started up. I was sitting there in the cafeteria. You and Brandon Reeds came and sat with me. I remember telling you the story. And I remember you invited me to be in a Bible study where we were reading the Fuel and the Flame. And I will say, I was like, man, I think I'll do it. And we had a meeting to decide where this thing was going to take place, and it was decided that it was going to take place in my dorm room. So at that point,
We made the commitment for you.
yeah. And man, I'm so grateful because as we were reading the Fuel and the Flame, and we are talking about living out our faith on campus, which is all the things that I wanted to do in my life, and I was still coming into my own as a man, and I still had lots of insecurities. I wasn't bold. in a lot of ways. And then what was amazing is we were reading this book, because the book itself wasn't going to do it. I don't even think just my dad and his story in the letter was going to do it. I needed a mentor in my life to push me, to help me to do the things that I knew I really wanted to do, but I was scared to do. And so that's who you were for me, Sean, because, that conversation that you were talking about with that guy, I knew I needed to do it. And I don't know, I wouldn't have done it if you weren't pushing me. I think even a month before that was the first time that we'd ever gone to share, I'd ever gone to share my faith, but really I was going with you to share with a guy on our floor. And I remember, hey, do you think we need to go share with this guy down the hall? And I had no other answer other, yes, we need to, but I was like, oh my gosh, I know this is where this is going.
What a question. Do you think we need to?
Yeah.
That's good.
And so you took me down there, and, I didn't think I was going to have to say anything. And then about halfway through, it was like, hey, Blake, why don't you share your testimony? And man, I stumbled through that. Part of me, I was like, man, wait, did he just put me on the spot? But when we left that conversation with that guy, I was like on cloud 9, because I was thinking we could have spent the last 30 minutes playing basketball, watching TV, studying. I probably wouldn't have been studying, but we just talked to a guy.
Despite the globe in the background, I see you got that power move with that globe, the intellectual.
So erudite,
power move,
scholarly.
It's all a facade.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say, I mean, we just talked to a guy about where he was going to spend eternity. Like how amazing was that? And I was so grateful, Sean, that you had taken me and pushed me and let me be a part of that. And then for the next 4 years in college, 3.5 years, that sparked something. And so I continued to share the gospel with guys on campus. It definitely got easier, but every single time it was like, okay, am I going to be a man here, or am I going to back down and not have this conversation that I know I need to have? It's not for my benefit. It's for this guy's benefit, but ultimately I'm not doing it even for his benefit. I'm doing it because my allegiance is to God, and he deserves to be glorified on this campus, in this person's life. And so, man, I want to share the gospel with this guy for that reason.
And I think you hit on something really important, and I want to camp out on a little bit. What happens when a guy has a mentor or versus doesn't have a mentor? Because you, from your own experience leading guys and being discipled yourself, what is the secret sauce that having a mentor provides? Like you just shared about evangelism and how it pushes you, lights that spark to be able to have those conversations. But what else does discipleship do for the godly man? Why is it so important?
Well, I absolutely believe that if we're just like left alone, that we'll continually to not make decisions, the hard decisions that will allow us to develop and become a stronger man. And so the mentor in our life pushes us to make those decisions that we know we really want to make. But also a mentor sees the blind spots in our life that we don't see.
For sure.
I remember there's many conversations that Sean had with me that he was challenging me on things, and they were all for my own benefit to grow and develop. And there were things that deep down I knew. I think when he told me, in my own pride, it's like, oh, I'm not struggling with that, or I don't need that.
Yeah, but we kind of stiff arm those things though. Like if we really say deep down, we could probably like admit that that's true, but we never want to. That's why you need a guy to say, hey, dude, I think you're prideful, or I think you are an angry person. Those kind of things.
Right, and so it's like in the moment, it's like, oh, that stings a little bit, but then I kept coming back, and because I wanted that, I needed that, and I knew that if I was going to become the person that God had created me to be, and the person that I really wanted to become, that I needed somebody in my life who was a little bit ahead of me, that was a little bit wiser, that had been there before, who knew things that I didn't know. I mean, I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so a mentor can push you in those areas to help you become the person you want to become.
Well, this is really cool to me because I'm staring at what, in my opinion, is an oak of godly manhood, and yet we're talking about the days when you were a sapling. And just realizing, man, when you are a sapling, like so many college guys today and guys in their 20s, from a spiritual standpoint, but in a lot of other ways too, man, the shortest drought can kill you. Um, a lighter wind can break you and kill you, and you're done. Versus the mature oak. And so I'm sitting here staring at you, and I'm like, here's Blake Brewer. He's the CEO of the endurance.org. He's the founder and CEO of the Father Up Challenge, and which I want you to talk about in a minute. But here you are, and you are out there challenging dads to engage with their kids, talking about the impact, the tremendous and unique impact that a father can have on his children. And we're sitting here talking about, back in the day when you were, scared to take small steps of faith. And man, to me, it's so encouraging to see these snapshots in your life from, almost a couple decades ago now. And man, just how much God has worked. Blake, tell us about the endurance and the Father Up Challenge.
Well, let me share a small win with you, Sean, as my mentor. Well, here's a couple wins. In the last week, I was on a podcast episode that has over 400,000 listeners. This next week, I'll be on one that has over 1 million.
Man, thanks for showing up for ours. Then I don't know. I feel slightly.
You made time for the small guys and also ours.
I feel slightly honored, slightly flexed upon, but mostly just grateful you're here. I mean,
I thought you guys had 2 million. But anyway, that's not my point. It wasn't that at all. But
right.
Really, my win was 2 weeks ago. I got invited to speak to my high school football team. And
so you said the team now, or the guys that you were on a team with?
The team now.
Okay,
so sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I got to share the story that I shared with you guys tonight. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. I got to share the gospel with these guys. But here's why this was such a win for me in my life. Because my senior year of high school, the football coach, before one of the games, said, "Hey, I'm going to give an opportunity for the seniors to speak to the team." Every senior spoke to the team except for one, me, because I was too scared to get up and speak. And then because of having a mentor in my life, because of Sean and the development that I had in college, I began to grow in this area because I knew that I had things to share and had a message to share. And so then when I got to speak in front of the high school football team, which really the first guy to come back from that team to be able to speak, man, it was just like cool. So cool. So yeah. Sean, you made that happen, man. Thanks for
That's really cool, man.
Well, dude, yeah, Blake, as we're moving towards a close here and finishing up, tell us about what you're doing with the endurance. Tell us about why you're putting your energy, your time into that. Why is it worth it?
Well, ever since my dad passed away, I knew that I wanted to impact other people's lives, whatever venue that was. So that's why I went on staff with STUMO when I graduated college. I had my accounting degree, but I was like, man, I think I want to go invest in college students.
Yeah.
And ended up doing that for 12 years. And then as that time came to a close, I was wanting to take that next step. And so the next step for me is now that I have become a father, which my third child, my son, was born this past week.
I saw that. Congrats. That's awesome.
9 pounds, 12 ounces, Brooks Brewer. He's amazing.
Yes. That's going to sound good on the at the football games, man, on the loudspeaker.
Well, I've got Bo Brewer and Brooks Brewer, and Bo Brewer, he came out at 11 pounds and 3 ounces.
Gosh.
And I'm already showing him videos of Bo Jackson. He loves playing baseball, and he loves we play fumble the football, and he loves going after the football. I mean, this guy's a hoss.
Don't let him dislocate his hip.
It's going to be the Brewer backfield, man.
Yeah.
And so through all of that, I've just sort of realized, and through the story of my dad, how important fathers are in us becoming men. Because it's one thing when somebody tells you, "Hey, Dave, man, great job."
Mhm.
if I were to tell you that. But man, when your father tells you, man, I'm so proud of you, man, I
Definitely.
love you, man, I really believe in you, man, it is like a wind in your sails. Like there's so
It
much
goes
confidence.
deeper. It goes deeper than
Oh,
anyone else. Yeah.
and I mean, our moms are awesome and have a crucial role in our life, but there's
Sure.
just something about when a dad speaks into our life. And so, um, I realize that I have an opportunity to allow fathers to speak into their life by allowing them to write and inspiring them and helping them write a letter like my dad did to me. And
Mm.
so if there's one thing I could help dads do, it's and tell them to do to connect with their children, hey, write a letter.
Mm.
Because in that letter, and we've created a course that helps dads write the letter. And our mission is to help 1 million dads in the next 10 years write a legacy letter to their children. But in this letter, they tell their children how much they love them, how proud they are of them, how much they believe in them. If there's any apologies or regrets, dads are putting that in the letter as well. But there's just something about it being being written down and knowing that, hey, my dad worked on this letter for a month or so.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of weight here. And then, kind of like me, my dad has been gone for 18 years, but his voice, his words are still guiding me to this day. And
Right.
so this can be true for these fathers that are writing this letter, whether they die soon or not, because there's going to be lots of times where a person is not around their father and making big decisions, but whose voice do we want in the back of their head? Their father's voice,
Yeah.
guiding them. And so, man, this is my mission right now, is to help dads write this letter. And it's been pretty amazing.
I love that. And I think it's amazing because Sean, you and I have talked just at other points of how really really widespread and terrible the effect of fatherlessness and absentee fathers or abusive fathers, all of that has been on our society. So I love the fight to battle against that. So we're kind of running out of time, so I wish we had more, but give me something practical, maybe as a guy who doesn't have kids yet, or some of our listeners who do have kids or don't have kids. What can I be doing as a prospective father, or if some of our listeners are already fathers, what can I do to be a better father to my kids, be a better leader to my children?
Well, definitely in your years before you become a father, um, you know that that you want to connect with your children one day. Well, the most important thing you can do is connect with your heavenly Father.
Mm.
So deepening that relationship with your father. But I would also say be mentally preparing to be a father. So what I've realized in our culture, and it's like none other in history, but in the last 100 years, we are not embracing fatherhood. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But for most of my life, I was preparing for a career. No one ever asked me, like, hey, what type of father are you going to be one day? So when I became a father, it was like, oh man, I haven't really thought about this. But biblically, I believe once you become a father, the most important thing that you have to steward is your family. And so before whatever profession you have, your identity before that is father. And so I would say to prepare for that, just knowing that, hey, one day your identity is going to be father, and then whatever career you choose, but we're
Mm.
all going to have to stand before the Lord one day. And I think before he asks, hey, what did you go do in your job, or what did you do with the gospel, any of those things, he's going to say, hey, what did you do with your family? Did
Mm.
did
Yeah.
you steward your family well?
That's so good, Blake. Man, I hate that we've run out of time, but I think you already know this, but you're on the endangered species list, man. You're a godly man, and I mean it. I think you're a legend of the manhood game. If my sons, I have 3 sons, if they could turn out to be like Blake Brewer, I would die a happy man. Dude, thanks so much for making time for us, bud. It's great to see you.
Hey, good seeing you guys. Love
Yeah.
being here. Appreciate it.